Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. Hosted by Dan Goodstein and IRPA AI, a professional association, media and peer research network, providing education, networking and advice to over 130,000 global members on automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. We're live Wednesdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available wherever you get your podcasts. And now, here's your host, Dan Goodstein.
Hello, everyone. Good to be with you. I'm Dan Goodstein, and welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where we're discussing today where those old apps went and what replaced them, plus headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. I'm here with Chris Surdak. He's an IRPA AI senior analyst, award-winning author, and former White House Chief Transformation Office advisor. Also spent some time at Gartner, EY, and all the big shop consulting firms. Chris, how are you?
I'm good. A little frog in my throat, and it's a little weird to look out my window and it's actually raining here in Southern California. So
weird stuff is happening. I'm in New York, and we have a heat wave. It's 40 degrees today, which is about twice the average temperature of the last 2.5 weeks.
Like a 45-degree swing for you or something. That's crazy.
You know what's funny is you forget how big the difference is between 40 and 0. Because when you're cold, it's just kind of like you're numb and it's cold and you can't like hang out outside. But I was telling someone last week, I'm like, that's the difference between 50 degrees and 90 degrees, and that you would notice, right?
Yeah. I always found growing up in the Northeast, you were always complaining about the current season and looking forward to the next season. That's how I know someone's from the Northeast.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Although, to be fair, we've had a very unseasonably cold year so far. The harbor across the street from my house that I can see from my window here has been frozen for the better part of the last couple of weeks, and I can't remember the last time that that happened. But yeah, anyway, that's the way things go. How's SoCal?
It's actually been warm and lovely, other than today. So yeah. For here, anything that isn't just pure blue sky is considered weather, and people go hide under their kitchen table because they don't know what to do about it.
So, Chris, before we jump into our headlines today, you finally updated your descriptor there as founder of Web 4.0. So, tell the people what you're working on these days. I haven't given you a chance to plug this yet.
Well, as I shared with you a moment ago, I'm actually back to writing after Jerk I wrote over 10 years ago, and that was a book about what the next 10 years would lead to. And so here we are 11 years later. How accurate was it? Pretty good. And at the time, people asked me, well, what comes after the information age, which is effectively where we've been the last 10 years. And at the time, I had no idea. I feel pretty good that I know what that looks like now. So the new book, as I am writing it right now, is going to be called Snap. Jerk is the third derivative of the equation of motion. Snap is the fourth. And so this is what happens after you jerk. You're gonna snap. So I'm looking forward to that. And then also, as you well know, my new startup, Relief Financial, which is a digital payments platform that uses a totally new kind of blockchain that I invented after 8 years of trying. Other side, this is actually the patent up there. Which uses the unused capacity of people's smartphones to process digital payments. And by doing that, we lower the cost of doing digital payments globally, and we effectively make smartphones self-funding. So for people that are in the developing world, can barely afford to have a smartphone, this allows them to join the digital economy, be digital citizens, and recapture. If you think about it, there's 7 billion smartphones on the planet, and they're mostly used for Instagram, driving around, and porn. And I want to see us use that untapped resource for something more useful. And so that's what Relief is here to do. Web 4.0.
Very cool. Very cool. We'll have a whole show on it because it's complicated, but also really impactful. And we'll have an entire show on it in the next month or so. But where can people get more information in the meantime?
Yeah, it was just Relief, RELEAF financial.com. We're posting pretty frequently. Signed our first major contract. It's moving pretty quickly, and we're pretty excited about it. So check us out.
Yeah, and there's some huge news announcements about to come out on this. So if you don't check it out now, you can check it out now, and then you can say, "I knew Chris way back when."
Only took 8 years to get the patent, so
yeah, it's been it's a slow burn, but then it's gonna snap. Is that appropriate? No.
I did according to the new outline. Yeah, it's gonna snap.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. All right, cool. Let's do headlines. So the U.S. added 130,000 new jobs in January, and unemployment is down to 4.3%. But there's always an asterisk, Chris. The but is that didn't cover the tech space. So there's been job gains in healthcare, social assistance, and construction, while the tech space, government, and financial services industries lost jobs last month. And, this went from something that we were kind of, would mention every few weeks to, I think we talk about it every week, but it just, you can't avoid these headlines. There's over 52,000 layoffs in, large U.S. companies, according to, a few news sources, including Goldman Sachs, basically as a result of the, AI squeeze, if you will. UPS just announced 30,000 job cuts as it kind of realigns its business to non-Amazon customers. And that's on top of 48,000 roles it already eliminated last year. And Amazon last week announced 16,000 corporate jobs getting cut, and it just keeps going.
So I'm certainly not the first person to write about this, but it's coming up where we have shifted from being a productive country. World War II, we won. That was a war of production, and we won from production, and that's what led to our wealth in the 50s and 60s. Because we just built stuff. We made all kinds of stuff, and we produced consumption for the entire world and helped the world that had been destroyed, Europe and Japan and China, rebuild from our production. And then over the last 40 years, we shifted to the financialization of our economy and the what I call performative work. Which is, let's sit in meetings and let's review stuff. And it's not necessarily adding to the production of our country, but everybody's working, but what are they producing? They're not really producing very much. And so this is sort of the backlash of that. If you look at that list of the jobs that went up, construction, healthcare, that's where someone has to actually stand there in front of you and do something. The other jobs that are kind of going away are in many, middle management at Amazon, 16,000 jobs. That was all performative. And I can say that unironically because I've done a fair amount of performative work myself. We have a staff meeting. There's 50 people there for an hour. Okay, was that 50 hours of productive work or what was it? So this is one of the shakeouts that I think comes from AI. If AI can do that sort of performative task in 1/50th of the amount of time and potentially at a fraction of the cost, and those jobs are going to go away pretty quickly. So it's going to be extremely disruptive. And a lot of the AI jobs that are being replaced by AI, I think are going to come back because they weren't appropriate to replace with AI, but there is going to be a substantial structural change in these performative jobs, I think.
So I had lunch last week with a friend, and she runs a marketing department within a large customer, one of our members, IRPA AI members. And she shared with me that her entire team, which at one point I think was at least a dozen people, is now gone, reallocated, laid off, or whatever. And so she's like a department of one. I mean, it's not, she doesn't run the entire marketing department. She runs a slice of it, but her team is now AI agents, and she's using AI agents for research, for writing, for collateral, for content. And I was surprised, I often am on both sides of this debate. So she was very much on the pro AI, her experience was good. So I just, as I do, took the counterpoint and talked about all the things I was concerned about. But she was pretty emphatic that it is, easier, faster, and quality wise after training, teaching. I think you mentioned before we got live that you've been using it for things where you've actually taught it to, use your voice, and that's what she said as well. She's been able to kind of get it to talk in the corporate brand voice, and she said most of the stuff that it produces is like 85-90% there. So that's one department, 12 people. I mean, you extrapolate that out, it's just significant, right? It's just and when I said to her, hey, what about it getting things wrong? What about it making mistakes? She said, yeah, and people make mistakes too. People get it wrong too.
Yeah.
Happening at a quicker scale, right? But she's like, I check every word, and and it's very interesting to see it actually, being used in a corporate way.
You cannot trust it. You have to review all of its outputs and confirm it, especially if it's something that is factual or it's important that it's correct. But if you're talented at whatever it is you're asking it to help you with, it is immensely valuable, and it doesn't have the peculiarities of trying to work with a staff, as in the example you give. She had to train 12 people to think like her and interact with her and all the social aspects of that. Or you can just have this perpetually functioning digital assistant that's always there, always enthusiastic, lies occasionally. It doesn't know it's lying, but can produce a lot of output. And so, yeah, I hate to say I tell you so, but this is straight out of my article from 12 years ago. Better be a baller. If you're a top 3 or 4% in what you do, this technology is going to make you invincible. But the other thing it does is it's an apocalypse for the old labor pyramid that we had, where you started out as an apprentice or an intern, and then you became an individual contributor, and then you became a manager. You annihilate the entire labor pyramid. And we see that in professional services organizations all over. Law firms are letting go of their young associates. Consulting firms are replacing the younger staff, and that's great for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years if you're at a partner level. After that, the firm's done, and so it's incredibly disruptive. And the other thing that people talk about is, okay, well, you're saving all this money. Who's buying your products and services now? If you're getting rid of everyone that's earning an income, who's buying your products? And so I think we're going to see those knock-on effects starting to have a bigger impact on organizations as well.
Yeah, I mean, just the amount of people within the workflow, so to speak. So my other story from last week is I was traveling. So I left my house. I checked the train schedule. I got in my car. I use my phone. I don't even have a physical key anymore. I use my phone as a key for my car. Drive my car to the train station, get on the train. 2 trains later, I go to have lunch, and I realize about halfway through lunch that my wife called me 11 times. And I'm like, oh God, something's wrong. What happened? I pick up my phone, and she goes, you left your wallet home. It took me 3 hours, and probably I probably conducted, a dozen transactions without ever interacting with a physical card, piece of money, or human being. Okay, there's a human being that took my, scanned my ticket on the train. Other than that, it took me that long to realize I didn't have my wallet with me, right? Click to pay, mobile apps, phone for your car key. I mean, we're getting to a point where you don't necessarily need people in so much of this process. And then, as these companies are saving money, making layoffs, getting more efficient, they're investing heavily into this, Chris. I mean, there's an article on LinkedIn today. Big Tech plans to spend $650 billion on AI goals. SoftBank is supposedly considering a $30 billion investment in OpenAI. Amazon also talking about investing $50 billion into OpenAI. It's just unbelievable, the numbers here, as companies kind of expand. Alphabet just raised $32 billion in global bonds to fund their AI efforts. And a lot of this is not just software, it's infrastructure.
Well, and you and I've discussed that too. Infrastructure. Well, that's an interesting term. So, of you look at that building there, the physical building for that data center might cost $5 or $10 million. It's not a huge amount, but I mean it's substantial. But the other spend here for all this AI stuff is two things: it's chips and it's electricity. The chips last, if you're lucky, 6 to 9 months because you're overclocking them and you're working them at extra high power and so forth. That's consumption. That's not infrastructure. And then the electricity is literally consumption as well. So unlike laying out the Eisenhower superhighway system across the United States after World War II, which was clearly infrastructure, or laying railroads across the continental US, clearly infrastructure, a big chunk of this is not infrastructure, it's consumption. And unless we make the breakthrough that we're all betting on, I mean, we're betting the farm on this general AI super intelligence. That's great if we make it, but what if we don't? And I'm not sure that we're going to like the potential downsides of that. And then what does everybody do if all of the computers are doing everything for us? I'm not sure that we are meant to be animals of leisure. We tend to not prosper when we're kind of laying down, having peeled grapes fed to us. That usually leads to some kind of downfall. So it's going to be interesting, and we're going at this full bore in the hopes that we're right.
So I want to talk about, and there's a connection from this to our main story, but so the main topic for today is this the apps that you used to use that are gone.
Can I stop you for a moment? Can you go back to that screen you just had up?
Yes.
You glossed right over it, and I just noticed that you look down on the right hand, LinkedIn News, the bottom story. PwC limits entry level roles.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's the
they're limiting it. They're limiting it to 13 locations. So it's spun as hey, we want to create a different vibe, different community, not as much your remote or hybrid work, and have these people all in the same place, which on its surface does sound like a good idea. But what that means is that if you're not in one of these 13 cities, you can't start working for PwC.
Well, when we made Japanese-born citizens in California move to concentration camps, we didn't call them death camps or concentration camps. We called them, like relocation centers. So, however PwC wants to spin it, it's just spin.
But yeah, it brings up the point of, and we talked about this. This is one of the things I mentioned to my marketing friend last week. It's like, how do people get into the business, right? How do they get into any of these spaces? And you could argue some of them they shouldn't be getting into, because if AI is replacing the work that some of these consultants are doing and some of these marketers are doing, then maybe that's the natural market landscape being what it is. But to your point, what are they going to do instead, right?
The challenge is the breaking of the social contract. When I got my engineering degree knowing that I would have a viable career from becoming an engineer, and then I got my MBA knowing that would give me a viable career either in Wall Street or consulting. There's younger generations are dumping $250,000 in debt that they can't free themselves from to buy into a life path that used to be guaranteed as part of the social contract, and we're breaking that social contract. That's a tough situation to put several million people into with no visible way out of it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so I saw this article 2 weeks ago on Vimeo. Vimeo was acquired by a private equity firm. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, Vimeo, are they still around? I didn't even realize they were still around. And so I'm reading through this article, and it's centered around layoffs, right? 1,300 people laid off in a weekend. The approximate HR cost at Vimeo was $200 million per year, and that they're being replaced by a team of between 100 and 300 people in Italy. It was an Italian PE firm. at about a fifth the salary. And so the article goes on to basically talk about, what happens when you have these inflated company sizes and things like you always talk about, Chris, but also, do you really need such a big team to run a single app or platform? So the company that acquired them is this company, Bending Spoons. And I'm thinking, and I'm reading this article and I'm saying to myself, I've heard of this company before. What is this Bending Spoon? So I look up the company, and it turns out that they've been buying up all of those apps that you remember from the olden days, that you didn't know still existed. So listen to this list, Chris. They in the last 4 years, they've acquired Evernote, Meetup, WeTransfer, Brightcove, which is another video platform, MileIQ, mileage tracking app, Vimeo. And right after the Vimeo announcement, they acquired AOL, whatever's left of it, the AOL portal, which we covered a couple months ago, and Eventbrite, the freemium event management platform that we've used. A lot of people have used. They own all these. Most of these acquisitions happened in the last 4 years. And it's this model of, economies of scale. Like, you don't need that many people to run a single app, a single platform. And let's, a little bit of arbitrage. Let's put them in Europe instead of in the US, but also let's have basically a shared service for technology companies, instead of having, 15 different companies with their own, $200 million payrolls.
Well, and there's a couple other angles to that too. I remember, 12, 15 years. I think it's so funny to say, all these old apps from way back when, 2017, right? Then,
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's forever ago. And then 12 years ago or so, there was a statistic. There was like already 1 trillion downloads of apps, and something like 99.5% of all apps are downloaded, opened once, and never opened again. So what you have here, Vimeo is one of the survivors of that ruthless Darwinian culling of apps. But I also remember back at Radio Shack. I mean, old guys like us remember Radio Shack. You'd go in and get your RC car or whatever, batteries, that kind of thing. When Radio Shack went bankrupt, nobody cared about the stores, their inventory, anything. Everyone was fighting over Radio Shack's data, because they were one of the first companies that had a Commodore 64 computer at the counter, and they took all of your data. And I think that's a lot of what's happening here too, is collecting data from these near dead platforms. They still had millions of customers, like you and me at Vimeo, millions of customers, all kinds of interaction. And then they're just mining that with more recent data, to do further monetization of customer information. That to me, and that's a smart thing for PE to do, because as you aggregate all that, I get an even deeper perspective of customers and so forth, and can sell better. And that also gives me more data to feed into AI for AI training. The downside is, you pointed out, I'm now unemploying thousands and thousands of consumers who, how are they going to get money to consume anything anymore? Yeah. So it's an interesting drawdown, that we're lowering our costs, but we're also making it so that no one can buy our products anymore.
It's getting harder and harder to have these discussions without a social and philosophical, maybe even political discussion, which we've tried to avoid. But yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder, right? The goal, I think, is, if you look at some of the characteristics of all these acquisitions that they've made, and there's other examples to your point in retail, where companies have bought up these brands that are have a lot of expensive assets, bloated maybe infrastructures and what have you, but they tend to be going after companies that have strong brand and loyal users, right? And in the tech space, it's very quantifiable user bases, to your point. If you add up the user, if you take the user base of any of these alone, it's one thing, but you add up the user base of Evernote, WeTransfer, Vimeo, Eventbrite. All of a sudden you have, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but you probably have millions, if not billions of users, and you already have a reoccurring revenue stream, right? Which is always tricky to get. So you already kind of have that. They're sort of mature products with, according to them, bloated costs, and they're digital, right? So they have the ability to scale in such a way where a retail, physical footprint wouldn't. And there's economy of scale here. So, you think about, who they're competing with, though, and you realize, like, to me, it's kind of a necessity, right? I mean, if you look at all of those products, I would argue that those products, even though they obviously got to a point where they were ripe for being acquired, some of those products are superior to their biggest competitor. I mean, at one point, I think the argument could be made that Vimeo was a better, at least from a quality standpoint, a better platform than YouTube. Eventbrite, I can tell you firsthand, was a much easier to use event platform than everything else that we used over the years. I remember WeTransfer being very easy to use. Meetup obviously was big for a while. I never used the Mile IQ, but I know there's a lot of bloated expense management software. So I don't think it's that the software wasn't good. I think it's that, you have this consolidation thing happening within the Microsoft ecosystem, within the Google ecosystem, where, and I looked right to see if Microsoft or Google made any similar acquisitions. And generally speaking, they didn't. They built their own. So they built, comparable or, maybe inferior products that won because of the ecosystem of users that they have, and the integrations and the, in theory, seamlessness, where, having these 30 different independent apps, didn't have.
All absolutely true. And there's another angle to this. This is nothing new. This sort of almost predatory investment. This is the movie Wall Street from 1986, where corporate raiders would come in and they'd buy a company because it was worth more if you broke it up than it was as an assembled whole. And I saw several articles this week talking about private equity doing this in food. So Panera and Chipotle. And there was an article that I saw this video where in Chipotle, they now, I assume you've gone to Chipotle and they hand make your burrito right there for you. They now have a scale that the person pushes from side to side in the station as they put stuff in, to minimize the cost, to minimize the amount of stuff they're putting in the burrito, so you get less for it. And the same is now apparently happening in Panera, which was also bought by private equity. If you go in there, like, you open up the sandwich and it's got less meat, less eggs, So when you have a brand that has very strong brand equity, very, very robust customers that have a lot of dedication. I mean, this is the old corporate rating model: buy it and suck the life out of it as long as you can, and and pull the profitability out of it. It ends up killing the company, but it's a great way of generating profits while you do so. It's not new. It's just a lot faster and it's a lot more egregious.
I agree with you in the retail space. I don't know if I agree with you in the tech space. I think it's impossible. I think what I took from this is it's nearly impossible. I remember watching Shark Tank, like in one of the first seasons, and somebody had, I think it was a beverage, and it was unique and it was healthy and there was nothing like it on the market. And they had sales and all the normal, like, check boxes that the sharks on Shark Tank ask for, right? It didn't get a single deal. Why? Because nobody wanted to compete with Coca-Cola and Pepsi, right? They just own that market. They squeeze everybody out of that market. I think tech is becoming that way. I think it's becoming so difficult to, now with AI, it actually puts a little asterisk in this comment, but, up until the last couple of years, I saw really great platforms die because people just were Microsoft shops or they were Google shops, and they'd rather use an app that's endorsed by and integrated into that ecosystem, especially in the corporate world, than a standalone app. I just got off a call where a client, basically just said they're not letting any of their vendors ever use Google Docs again because they're a Microsoft shop and because compliance and regulatory, right? And that's Google. Imagine a third-party app that no one's ever heard of.
So you're reading ahead in the book that I'm now writing, Snap, where I talk about this, and we're getting to this point where the huge platformers are driving out all of these other competitors that are in many ways better and driving out competition. And I go back to Star Wars, where Princess Leia is talking to Darth Vader, who's like, the more you squeeze all these planetary systems, the more they're going to slip through your fingers. And that's what happens. At some point, you're gonna take what made Chipotle and turn it into Taco Bell, and then then you lose that distinction. But you plant the seed for someone else to meet that individualistic need. You see this in beer, as you mentioned, beverages, right? People stop buying Budweiser and stuff like that, but the craft breweries are taking off, and you can charge more for it. You get a more dedicated customer base, et cetera. So the more you sort of commoditize in one of these spaces, yes, you're going to drive profitability out. You're going to make it more efficient, more effective, drive up volumes, but that's a race to the bottom. And this is the polarity we see. Now, people either shop at Walmart now and spend as little as possible, or they're going to Nordstrom's. You don't shop at Sears or JCPenney's or Kmart anymore. They're gone. So we're driving out the middle. And so I either uber commoditized stuff, or I want this hyper personalized, hyper high end experience, and I'll pay whatever I need to get that. That we've seen that for going on 15 years now.
Yeah, I think the other reason is the way financing plays into it, right? It could be a publicly traded company with investors and Wall Street expectations, but it could also be PEs and VCs where you take their money and then they're driving the agenda, which could be race to the bottom stuff, or a lot of these situations it's a push to get into new businesses that don't necessarily make sense. Talk about creating a bloated company, right? Actually, Kraft Heinz was in the news today also. They a month ago decided, or 2 months ago decided, they were going to split Kraft and Heinz because it had gotten too complicated and too big, and now the CEO wants to not split it. But the idea was that hey, we've just gotten so huge and complicated that it's not good for either of the potential new businesses. And you just see this over and over again. You see acquisition after acquisition after acquisition. Then you see splits and divestitures, and a lot of this is driven just by I think you kind of alluded to this before, just investors and money trying to do different things that are not necessarily in the best interest of the business or the consumers. But maybe it's okay to stay in your lane, right? Maybe make your product better and bigger or what have you, and stay out of other industries and other businesses. Obviously it's worked for the Amazons of the world, but there's a lot more examples where it hasn't worked, and the company just got it. Maybe you don't need a $200 million payroll for a video app. Maybe that's fair.
Well, and we're about to see that was provably the case. We've gone through this almost 20-year-long era of nearly free money, which is just an aberration. You could get loans for less than 1%, et cetera, et cetera. And so it allowed all kinds of behaviors, hiring, investments made where there was effectively no risk whatsoever. So why not do it? And now that's kind of going away a little bit, particularly with recent moves, particularly by Japan, you have 60 or 70% of Fortune 500 companies are zombie companies. They are debt financed solely. If you took away their ability to get debt financing, they would go bankrupt. And so you're going to see a little bit of natural weeding out from a very Darwinian perspective from that. But then you also have this, if there's always this expectation of being 4% better every year, where does that 4% come from? Well, you're either going to do the same old thing you've done somehow more cheaply, which I've called snickering in the past, right? Remember, Halloween Snickers bars used to be about this long, and were pretty good, and they keep making them smaller every year to pretend that they're doing 4% better, and they're not.
Inflation.
Yeah, exactly. Or there's performative novelty. So you mentioned Heinz, Kraft Heinz. I don't know if you've been to the grocery store lately, but they have like peanut butter flavored ketchup and that's wild different flavors that when I supported the food industry many years ago, you would not come up with all these different flavors and stuff because you had to pay to get every one of them on the shelves. So every new SKU, every new product that you produce was really expensive to deploy. And now they're trying everything. There's like orange cream soda flavored Coke and huge amounts of novelty, which is cool to a certain extent. But there's a point at which it just doesn't work because there's not enough people that want peanut butter flavored ketchup.
And consistently, I think that's the other issue. There's a novelty factor. It's like
I'll buy it once. I'm not buying it a second time.
Right. My wife and I always had this fight about, support the local stores and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. But every time I go and I have a bad experience. And once in a while, it's like, okay, do I find something very unique in the local corner gift store? Sometimes, but I'm not going in there every week for my normal stuff. I'm still going on Amazon to buy my bulk and buy my regulars and stuff. So, can the novelty scale? I think that's the other challenge.
And it doesn't. And so I'll try hamburger flavored popcorn once. I'm probably not going to try it a second time. Right. So I mean, it sounds, and someone's giving you that performance, from Mad Men, the guy standing ready, imagine popcorn, but it tastes like a hamburger. Someone bought off on that. And so there's a point at which that performative novelty just doesn't work anymore. And so where does your next 4% come from? Yeah.
Well, to close that story out, the Bending Spoons organization is, by the way, they're valued at more than $10 billion. So don't let the small apps deceive you. They've created a very large one of Europe's rare tech decacorns. But they're not even offering kind of cross-platform bundles or subscriptions yet. They're still all very standalone. It's more of a back office cost play. So there's even potential for that out there. But it makes me wonder, Chris, with AI allowing you to basically build an app in a day now, does the AI thing help the bigger companies, or does it help the smaller guys?
Well, that's back to the point of Budweiser versus craft breweries, right? It helps both, but it helps them in different ways. For the commodity player, it helps you collapse your cost structure so you can keep generating 4% returns, right? You can get 4% cheaper every year because I just get rid of more and more of my cost structure. For the craft brewer, for the high touch, high value add, it lowers your cost of entry. If somebody does want hamburger flavored popcorn, and if you can use AI to produce it more effectively and find those people that value that as a product, then you're going to do well at small scale, meeting a very niche need that person values highly, so they're willing to spend more for it. And so that polarization of markets and demands, again, I've been writing about this for 15 years. This is it's getting to the point where it's extremely so. And that's exactly what we're seeing here.
Interesting stuff. Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure as always. If you're working on anything that you need help with, please reach out to us. We're here to help. Schedule a call with someone like Chris, one of our analysts and subject matter experts. It's a free service we provide as an industry association. You can go to irpaai.com/analysts. Or if you're on the sell side and you're looking to promote your offerings, you can become an approved vendor or join our vendor subscription. Go to irpaai.com/providers. Chris, thank you so much, buddy. Have a great week. We're off next Wednesday, but we'll see you all on the 25th at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Thanks, everybody.